Congratulations, Jeff. Don't worry about the study group. You can talk to them later. Why don't you and I go celebrate someplace private and boozy?
Annie, why are you acting like a mistress in a Lifetime movie?
You're funny. Oh, sweetheart, you dropped your phone earlier. You got a voicemail from a guy named Mark? You should call him.
Not now. I have to find the others and figure this out.
Crap, we're losing him.
What? Who are you? You're me? But how? Enough of the pleasantries. I've come from the darkest timeline to make sure you take that job. It's essential to our future. You want it, idiot, so take it. I can't. I've spent almost 4 years here growing and changing and making dioramas. I'm not that guy anymore. You're wrong. Greendale may have dulled your killer instinct, but trust me, it's still in you. It's time to leave this place and reclaim your proper life. No. Not without my study group.
Now who's in a Lifetime movie?
Podcast, the weekly pseudo-academic roundtable of pop culture analysis with drinking and swearing. My name is Christopher Maverick, but you can call me Mav, and I am once again here with the whole team, Katya and Hannah and Wayne. How's it going, guys?
Hey, Mav.
It's the end of the world.
Wrong episode, but I mean, maybe
not entirely the wrong episode.
no. And I think all of our episodes are about to be the same because
they're all.
I'm
the world.
I'm still crying over the Bake Off.
Oh, we should always cry over the Bake Off,
but like in a good way.
I've been watching old seasons of it, and I watched the season recently with Henry, like the younger guy with the ties, and I just want to pinch his little cheeks. I realize probably at this point, I don't know how old that season is.
It's like 2 years.
It's
like
much younger than I am.
It's like it was last year's season, so he's like 21 now, I guess.
Oh, okay. I feel better about saying I had to pinch his little cheeks then, because
still an adult.
He's just so cute.
I was going to say that man is 87 years old now. That was a real.
No, man. I've been rewatching a lot of old television, and then I'll be like, oh, like that person's probably like, my age or whatever. I'm like, oh no, this is a season of television from 10 years ago. They are not.
Well, I mean,
because time is meaningless when streaming services exist.
Well, time is meaningless anyway.
We said on the episode about crushes, we said on the episode about crushes, like I have this constant crush on Audrey Hepburn as she exists when she's like 27 years old. Now, she is now dead and has been for quite some time.
Almost 30 years, yeah.
And lived a long, full life to where she was an old woman when that happened. But like in my head.
Mav, to be fair, if anyone was going to have a crush on like a zombie actress, I feel like you would be the first one I'd be placing bets on.
No, zombies creep me out. There's like, uncanny valley thing. No, I don't.
Really?
No, I've got no interest in that sort of thing. No.
Well, at least now I know not to take that bet.
Yeah. Anyway,
although zombies actually might be appropriate. So what's the episode today, guys?
The episode is we're talking about the darkest timeline or the horror.
You mean our timeline?
Yeah, maybe. Well, that's the question, because like I always see all these people talking on memes. 2020 is the worst. This is we are truly in the darkest timeline. Every time the president does something horrible, and it's been. I mean, I'm not, since we record this in the past of the listener, so I'm sure he did something horrible in the last 15 minutes for us. But when you listen to this in the future, a week from now, he did something horrible.
Hundreds of things.
Right. 15 minutes ago, you're constantly going, oh God, what this now? And that's like been all of 2020. And I see people say, this is truly the darkest timeline. I saw somebody theorize that the reason 2020 is like this is because secretly, and we didn't know it at the time, but Baby Shark is actually like a demonic incantation that has unleashed hell, opened the hellmouth and unleashed it on Earth, and that scans.
I would kind of accept that. I feel like that's just the kind of absurd movie concept that I you know what, if that's how we go out.
I mean, that's what all the
guys. Let's talk about this. This is super important. Back to the Future 2 is the answer to all of are questions about this because back,
So we're
like,
go back in time and make our parents have sex so Trump
no,
doesn't happen?
no. That's back in To the Future Part 1. Back to the Future Part 2 is literally about Donald Trump.
Right.
Yeah, literally,
Right.
it literally is because for those of you who are not recent watchers of Back to the Future 2, Back to the Future 2 is about how Marty goes into the future to 2015 to save his son from making bad decisions, and then is like, oh my god, I can game my own future. I can take this like book of like sports scores and place some well-placed bets, and I will get rich. It'll be amazing. And then Doc is like, no, capitalism is the root of all evil. Don't play around with it. That's at least what he should say. And you should destroy this. But Biff Tannen...
That was the subtext.
Yes, but
Biff
Biff Tannen gets a hold of it, and Biff Tannen literally becomes Donald Trump with casinos and murders Marty's father and marries Marty's mother and becomes an abusive husband and father figure. I wonder who that sounds like.
He's intentionally based on Trump.
Yes, that's what I meant by like literally based on Donald Trump. So the point is that Donald Trump went back in time to his younger self and gave him the betting book that Marty McFly had, and like they were just trying
what we really
to tell
need to freak
something.
out about, though, is then who gave Trump the time machine? Because
He stole it.
He did not figure that out himself.
No. Like he stole it. Like Biff is like not the smartest guy in Back to the Future, but he is smart enough to figure out I can get this time machine in the same way that Trump somehow still won a presidential campaign.
Magic.
I mean, the Electoral College is, performs these
Which
kind
is
of...
similar to magic.
So wait, to make it clear, so given that people are always saying this, and we're talking about the horribleness that is 2020, this episode we thought we'd look at some other, hey, here's horrible timeline types, not necessarily timeline, but horrible future apocalypse. No, it's not post-apocalypse, but we want to compare to other movies, books. Role-playing game is one of mine. And is 2020 really the darkest timeline? Are things as bad as we think they are? Are they worse? They might be.
So
Back to the
want
Future
to quibble with the premise slightly.
Okay.
Because of especially this with the films you mentioned and we talked about when we were conceptualizing the show, those things like Blade Runner, things like Neuromancer. I also feel like Snow Crash in there, which is a little bit different, also funnier, also better.
Okay.
Mad Max, things like that. So I guess the thing is, though, a lot of those worlds are like grappling with the aftermath of some kind of like either gradual or sudden cataclysmic event. So like in Mad Max, it's nuclear holocaust. In like for Blade Runner and like in Snow Crash is like this too. And actually, they're those universes are kind of connected in some ways. But like it's like the encroaching like extreme capitalism, and also we don't care about people. Again, as a reminder on the show, eugenics bad.
Also capitalism bad, which is tied to eugenics.
Capitalism bad. We'll have a t-shirt that says capitalism bad, eugenics bad, all those things bad. But like those are the worlds that are dealing with like what the world looks like after something has gone horribly wrong. Whereas I feel like when people are saying things like 2020 is the worst, they're pointing out like not necessarily that these things weren't already going on. I mean, I think that's an important point when like we're talking about things like the systemic racism that everyone's grappling with and things like that. But like a lot of things have come to a head simultaneously, and it feels like basically this is the cataclysm that happened before the Fallout video game series that they're always hearkening back to, not the Fallout game series. Is what I'm trying to say. So this feels like the prequel. So
the question is, are we in the midst of the pseudo extinction level event that leads us to the apocalypse?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, that was a fun show. All right.
Because I guess the thing is well, okay, it depends. I mean, partially, and I think because a lot of the things that we're panicking about, and rightly so, in the United States in particular, are Americentric issues. Like Trump is not localized to the United States because he has a big red button, but and so he is a global problem. But a lot of the things we're dealing with, I don't know if basically there's the same level of global panic, which I think like a lot of these worlds, like these film worlds, television, movies, like books, it's a global cataclysm. And like the pandemic is definitely that. But I guess I see a lot of people on in countries that handled the pandemic much better, which is pretty much all of them, leading normal lives right now. And I'm sure there's things there's things going on globally, currently the Armenian genocide picking back up again. things like that. But like, I don't think it's a world. I don't think this is we haven't hit the nuclear bomb Holocaust level yet. I'm not saying we won't.
Sure.
Because I had forgotten about feral pigs until I read your post again.
Yeah, that was this year.
So,
I did see murder hornets in the news again this week. So
oh no.
Well, because I have a question then. So if we're talking about the premise, when we watch these movies, when we watch the ones where not like a Terminator, because Terminator, she's in the midst of trying to stop she's trying to stop the future apocalypse by dealing with a very localized problem, right? The rest of the world doesn't know what Sarah and Kyle know, right? So so not that, but like for most of the problems, like when we're looking at something like a Mad Max movie or I'm trying to think, RoboCop, most of these films, or we look at them, Walking Dead. We look at The Walking Dead like this is a global problem. There's a zombie apocalypse that has encroached upon the entire world and everything is hell. Does it ever actually say that? Or is it possible that it's just America is fucked?
Yeah, well, that's it. They lose contact with the rest of the world. So the assumption is there, but no one really knows.
But in fact, the rest of the world has just decided 2020 happened. Yeah. We don't want Trump. We're just going to put literal and metaphorical walls around the United States and be like, you guys stay in there.
Well, so like
just contain disease.
In Hunger Games, I'm pretty sure that's the case, right? Hunger Games Panem is America. And like they're where, but like, I don't necessarily believe that in the world of Hunger Games, France, the UK, Japan, Canada, they're possibly all fine. It's just the idiots in the United States who ruined their lives.
Yeah, well, in the Handmaid's Tale universe, depending on how much of the lore you get into or what canon you want, but like in the original book, it seems like there's an outside of Gilead / America, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's Canada. It's because we had. Yeah, actually, and like the Handmaid's Tale is like, I think one of the most common like comparisons in this kind of conversation people have had since 2016 happened. Mm-hmm. In the sense that like we're living in the pre-Gilead United States where, things just like line up one after another where it's all going to go wrong and we're going to be living in a world run by neoconservatives, more so than we are now, to the point that it is that kind of patriarchal hellscape that, again, in some ways already exists. I think that like the thing about, like Back to the Future too is like also very localized, right? Like it mostly focuses on the United States and in particular the specific home of like where Marty lives and his family. And I mean, like, even if you picked a movie we don't think about, perhaps, but like It's a Wonderful Life.
I was just going to say that one.
Like that future also is like capitalism run rampant by like horrible businessman, like destroys town on a micro level. But that was also, the problem that America was facing and is still facing in exacerbated ways.
I guess like those are not the movies. I guess those are not. I guess we're talking about a couple different things here. There's matters of scale.
Yeah.
Of like, is it local? Like, which I think is actually an interesting idea, because when people are like, to go back to like Mav's like premise of like the tweet of like 2020 is the worst. Like when people are saying 2020 is the worst, are they saying like 2020 globally is the worst? Are they saying 2020 is the worst in my specific neighborhood? Like I know even my parents are currently in Oregon. I'm in Michigan, which are two states that have been hit very differently by just, if we just isolated the pandemic, have been hit very differently. Handled very differently, especially in the beginning where like Detroit was one of the highest densities of COVID cases. Whereas Oregon has had comparatively none. Like not saying my parents don't take it as seriously, but like I don't think that they would be saying the same like cataclysmic narrative as I would in terms of like the effect the pandemic in particular has had on our specific lives.
And that's probably the thing,
and then there's nuclear holocaust, which is just everything goes to hell. Right,
but when we read these books, when we watch these movies, right, the text that we're talking about, we only obviously they usually focus on the bad places because the story in the interesting place. I mean, in the places that are fine isn't that interesting. I mean, I sort of wonder. I wonder what the story of is. You know, is there a novel in the Star Wars universe where it's just on an outer planet and everything's just kind of fine, and it's just people sitting around watching the news going, "Oh, rebels blew up a Death Star." So anyway, what's the score of the Mets game? You know, like is that like a thing?
Yeah, I mean, the nature of fiction involves conflict, so you tell the more interesting stories. I mean, that's,
right.
I don't know about Star Wars, but I mean, Firefly has that premise kind of baked in because like there's the difference between the inner and the outer planets. The inner planets like are completely unaware really of like a lot of the conflict that's going on in the outer planets and like don't like, or like they're aware of it as like a vague thing that, they read in a book or, hear about it on the news, but it's not a real thing until like, Reavers are coming to town, which they also believe that Reavers are a myth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The Mandalorian seems to touch on some of that. I mean, like, I'm not real convinced wow, my mind just went blank. The Jawa care a whole lot about what's going on in the Empire.
Right. And nor should they, because they're, well, I mean, they probably care. Like I'm thinking about like in our real lives, right? When a war happens, I care about the war, but the war in Iraq or Afghanistan or something like that, the effect on my day-to-day life doesn't change all that much. Like I watch it on the news, I might care, but like I still get up and go.
If you have family or friends who are there, you view it very differently.
Right. But my if you look at if you look at any operation that happened after 9/11, 9/11 changed everybody's lives in America directly for like a good solid week as we were adjusting to it. But then once the actual war and the aftermath happened, most of my day-to-day go to work, go to school, go to, whatever life is very much, fairly close to what it was before that. Now, there are obvious changes that happen to our culture in the wider sense since that. And I think that, like, for instance, what Katya was just saying, for those of us who are in places with lots of COVID cases, their restrictions are fairly strong. And, and there's obviously an effect, like, our silly little movie game is just frozen, right? Because it has to be. But for somewhere that doesn't have,
I better still be winning that.
You are still winning.
Yes, it's my one shot at glory.
Look, I don't anyone else to win because I want everyone to stop going to the movies. But continue with your point.
But like for somewhere like Katya's parents live, if it's relatively safe to go to the movies, if it's relatively safe to, like how much has their day-to-day life changed? Obviously, your parents are smart and they're worried about the global situation. I get that. But like their actual day-to-day activity life, is it that much different? Are they working from home or, what's going on there?
I mean, both of my parents are retired and they're not people who like go out a ton. I mean, also they live outside of Portland, which has been a giant mess for other reasons.
Sure.
They're still like, that's, I don't claim to know like the on the ground situation of Portland, but from what I've heard from like family and friends that are there, like it's still pretty bad in terms of like federal agents and policing right there. There's now a police review that's basically found like, please stop like accidentally quote unquote accidentally pepper spraying homeowners in their houses.
Right.
And causing like asthmatic children to need to go to the hospital. Like that would be nice. Can we at least set that as a bar that we're not going to go over?
So then is this darkest timeline because not just because, we're in a situation where there's a global pandemic, but because so many things that we normally, any one of which could be the beginning of a plot to one of these films. Feral Hogs, as Wayne pointed out, like any of these could be the plot to one of these films or books, and yet they all happen. I mean, like Geostorm, right? As horrible a film as Geostorm is, Geostorm has exactly zero geostorms in it. It's the threat of a geostorm that they're worried about. And then, as I pointed out in the blog, we've had so many hurricanes this year that we ran out of letters. We're as we record this, Hurricane Delta just fell because we have to start the alphabet over. That should be a big deal. And how much of a news story is it? Well, we got a lot of. I will say
that they missed a big opportunity to call that the Hurricane D2 Mighty Duck.
Oh man. Okay.
Because it's the second.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. But I think what's interesting is that, like, we talked a little bit about this on our post-apocalyptic show, but a lot of these narratives, like, they are about the present, and they also like to go back to David Mitchell, the author of things like The Bone Clocks or Cloud Atlas. Part of the reason why he's writing about like a climate change, like paramilitary run world, is not because he thinks that might be the outcome, though it might very well be if we see the patterns of how we are acting, but also to convince us to, change our ways and stop being so obsessed with Disney to the point that in the future one day all movies will be ubiquitously known as Disney's. Like corporations, like inevitably one day might become like the god in worlds more so than they are because that's just the way things are going. That's a logical outcome. Like a million kids are not killing each other for our amusement on TV, but the things the Hunger Games certainly says about reality TV and how it plays into politics, I think became even more poignant after 2016 and how the president now announces Supreme Court justices like it's a reality TV event because he was a reality TV host, which also I forgot about that for 10 seconds because there's just so much more happening that
there's too many things. I honestly can't even keep the running list in my head.
I think that's it. It's too many things. It's like this year has given us this giant reading list of apocalyptic fictions, but they're real. And the timeline thing, Mav, you'll know, like the What If series from Marvel. I'm going to throw the comics thing in. The premise of What If is, what if what if Jane Foster had found the hammer of Thor? Right. Which 40 years later they did that for real, but at the time it was one story. What if a lot of what ifs they just rolled into the real. Yeah.
But there's it's like experiments, and they're sort of like, oh, this seems I like this. Let's do this.
The main thing you learned reading What If back in the day is every other possible timeline was worse than the mainstream Marvel universe. They would change the original premise of it is if you change just one thing, how would things play out differently? Every butterfly effect is worse. In the original, every one of them, every one of them, just across the line, every issue. Like, see, be thankful for what you got in the main Marvel universe because it's crap everywhere else. Right.
Are they just trying to silence the fans who are obsessed about a particular character's dying or something?
Maybe that might have been part of it. I think it allowed them to some experimentation in terms of storytelling. But even back then, I was like, well, that's every one of them just ends in horrible tragedy with the universe exploding or everybody dying or something.
But I kind of want to go back to what Hannah was saying earlier too. Is I think there's this interesting thing, even Wayne, what you're talking about, there's too many things happening at once. And I think because in my mind in science fiction, then when I think of the post-apocalyptic narrative, there's two kind of distinct, although sometimes they're interrelated depending on the story, but two to me kind of distinct categories. One is the nuclear holocaust scenario. One big, usually natural disaster or man-made disaster happens, changing how life fundamentally functions on the planet. It's or it's this gradual mounting of a lot of different, not necessarily connected cultural things. I mean, and often those two things, I say that they're distinct, but for example, but they are one usually causes the other. So so to go to Mad Max, Mad Max is a great example because it's there is massive climate change problems that are creating the world of Mad Max and all the deserts and everything like that. But that is linked to basically rampant capitalism and specifically fossil fuel use, which is a natural disaster caused by a cultural one. Even though there's these two, I see these as two kind of different, I don't know if I'm going to call them trends, but these two different kind of aspects. I feel we're more in the lots of things happening at once that's going to at some point lead to cultural change, either good or bad. That's to me what 2020 is. Even with the pandemic, which I think is more of the natural disaster camp, even with the pandemic, I think in the United States specifically, I would still put it in that second camp of the pandemic. I think we've talked about this in previous shows, the pandemic revealed a bunch of problems that were already happening, which is interesting because that's kind of what Hannah was saying. It's that is the function of a sci-fi story.
Yeah, to point this stuff out.
Right. And so we had the natural disaster point out the cultural problems, which is a very interesting.
Well, I think Mav and I've talked about this on the show before, and I know in person that the science fiction and a lot of speculative fiction in the past there seemed to be a more hopeful thing for the future, jetpacks and technology and all that stuff. And
I want my flying car.
And I mean, that wasn't always true. You also had, Lovecraft out there doing his thing. So it wasn't all hopeful and shiny.
What if there were monsters under the sea and
right?
Yeah, they'll kill you. They'll always kill you.
but there did seem to be that sense of technology will save us, and there is a bright, shiny future ahead of us. And that seems to be a strain of science fiction or speculative fiction that's missing these days. Everything is, if not dystopian, at least, it's all going to suck.
But Katya, this is more of a question for you. Wasn't that mostly just a moment of time? Because the earlier science fiction wasn't that, right? Like, there was a lot of fear of progress.
Welcome to my master's research. So I spent a lot of time in my master's program researching actually exactly this question. Was like there's this this kind of like mythos, which is kind of typified by a lot of what Gibson says about early science fiction. So like the Golden Age, the Amazing Stories eras before that, and like where he and a lot of like more contemporary like post 45 sci-fi authors, well later than post 45, I would go with like 70s 80s, kind of talk about early sci-fi 20s 30s 40s and even into the 50s as characterize it as a kind of naive and juvenile approach to sci-fi and to precisely this idea of like where it's sunshine and roses sort of like all the way down. I think it's more complicated than that because there's two strains of sci-fi, and one of them that we kind of forget is that a lot of that like really upbeat science fiction was originally published in young boys magazines. It's actually YA fiction. True.
Right.
And it was much more uncommon at the time to see dystopian YA fiction. It's like it doesn't exist, but like the kind of like I think it's like I would say right now, like the dominant, especially the popular science fiction of like in YA context, there's a lot more dystopian fiction there now. I don't think that historically is not something I see, which I think that's part of the disconnect. It's also, and much like I think kind of like comic books, the early readership of science fiction was usually like young boys and young and adolescent boys.
I mean, my research into pulp magazines shows a lot. I mean, pulp magazines just don't have the cachet and nostalgia factor today for most people that like comics do. So if you actually go back and read old issues of Argosy, there's hell on earth in a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Like they're awful.
Yeah.
I mean, not awful.
And they
They're
were
great
often
stories, but
designed for that purpose. Like a lot of the editors. So one of the interesting things about those early pulps, a lot of them were actually, the editors were not people who had any interest in literature. Most of them were in the sciences. And so there were two kind of goals that a lot of those periodicals set out. One was sort of like the Hugo Gernsback, we must invent the future kind of way, which I think is where they get the reputation for upbeat fiction. Although if you look at Amazing Stories, that's not actually descriptive of what he published, even if it was his ideal. And then but a lot of it was basically like, I mean, going to like, I always go to Isaac Asimov, and he's interviewed, I think in the New York Times, actually, it's like a major paper, like after the bombing of Hiroshima. And he basically has a quote in there. It's like, we've been telling you, and I think the line is something to the effect of like, science fiction authors are proved to be a bunch of wailing Cassandras. Like, we've been telling you this for decades, that this was going to happen, and it's not good. And so, I think, I don't know if that actually answers their question, but I always go for an opportunity to make out my sci-fi research at any time.
and it's so much of the cultural thing, the post-war, and this leads into the Silver Age of comic stuff is. Science was this amazing thing. We were all going to have dishwashers and, let's say, flying cars and jetpacks. It was going to make our life easier. Oh, by the way, the atomic bomb is going to kill everybody too. So,
but even when the atomic bomb first surfaced, I mean, there's an entire period of like design that's based like atomic design that was based off of the idea that the atomic energy, not the atom bomb,
to save us, right?
In particular, was going to be the future. I mean, there's entire utopian societies that are conceptualized around this premise that like the bomb will save us.
But then,
hence the plot of the Fallout games.
Yeah. But there was the anxiety that came out of that, manifested in all those giant monster movies and that sort of thing as well. So that there was this underlying, yes, it's atomic power is the wave of the future, but giant scorpions.
I think it's always been like like I feel like
Murder
science
hornets.
fiction. Oh God, murder hornets. But I think science fiction genres, and I and I think this goes back to kind of like our apocalypse and like dystopia episode from a few weeks ago. Like it's always to me, science fiction always feels like both and like it's both trying to be optimistic about the future, trying to be optimistic about what science can do, but also being like, hey, here's all the ethical nightmares you're about to run into.
Right.
That scientists aren't necessarily thinking about, because scientists aren't necessarily trained, not always trained to recognize like these massive ethical issues that will lead to eugenics.
Yeah, two points. One, like even if you go back to early, what was considered earlier science fiction in like 19th century, this is also true of the both and even like things like The Coming Race by Edward Buehler Lytton are also extremely pessimistic and strange, and also convinced the Nazis that Vril was a thing. Just a footnote there.
Yeah.
Vril is a mythical substance. Point two, Jurassic Park is about how scientists need to take humanities courses. The end. That's all.
Jurassic Park. Yeah.
I mean, like
basically though, because like there's a lot of research that actually, like, going back and looking at different scientific movements, that actually, like, unfortunately, scientists are not trained to do policy and advocacy work. It's not their job.
Yeah.
Like there were like groups of concerned scientists that tried to basically stop nuclear powers from emerging. It didn't work. And like we see it now in sort of like the environmental movement. People are talking about like, listen to the scientists. Unfortunately, historically, that hasn't always worked. It's one of the things I think about a lot. I thought about a lot of my research. It's like, it's like the idea that like scientific facts actually, unfortunately, don't speak for themselves. It's an ideal, but like in the public sphere, you need to be able to tell a story that people find compelling.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but the problem is that there's a false dichotomy, right? Like so we tell people, we'll use the pandemic as the example, right? Listen to science, right? And I understand listen to science during a pandemic, because if you don't listen to science, you die. If you do listen to science, you don't die. This is an easy choice. It's A versus B, right? Yes, I realize.
Unless you're a nutso person.
Well, and that's kind of where it gets to, right? Because our alternative to listen to the scientists, it tends to be, just because of the way that we've set up, I don't want to say the world, certainly America, but lots of other places too, is the choices are science or politician. And right now it's listen to science or listen to Trump. This is
religion.
not. Yeah. But this is not the actual only choice, right? Like the problem is that, we don't have a rule that is listen to the humanitarian, right? Like it should be.
Yeah.
We teach humanities in school. We teach history and philosophy and cultural studies, which is what we do. We teach English. We teach psychology. We have theology. We have all these humanities that we teach in college, but at no point do we ever, because we have like so blessed the idea of STEM, or we have blessed the idea of public service, which means politics. At no point do we ever look at that. We like, people deride philosophy. Philosophy is a joke to so many people, as though,
especially in the United States.
Right. And it's like, no, this is a real thing that it's a discipline that we came up with for a very good reason, because there's a meme that goes around that I see in sort of my circle, I want to call it viral. It's viral if you are a pop culture, cultural studies person, but probably not for anybody else. It's like, if you ignore science, you get Spider-Man villains. If you ignore humanities, you get Batman villains.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's
kind of like.
And I think the interesting thing, just talking about politics, is like before the show we were talking about political ads. I don't think I've ever seen a political ad where, or at least I very rarely see political ads. I shouldn't say I've never seen, but I very rarely see political ads where a politician is like proud of having a humanitarian or like humanist background, like the one that you're talking about. It's usually like, I'm a business person, I understand business, or I've been a politician going back, 18 generations, and I'm in like this weird dynasty thing. You're not like, and I'm speaking specifically the United States, and
we don't value the philosopher king.
You don't value the philosopher king. And I think it's also like I think American society and maybe I'm sure other cultures as well. It's like, but this is the one with which I'm most familiar. There is an unwillingness to have, like, because to me, like a lot of the value, I've been thinking about this a lot actually. It's like the value of the humanities is some kind of like intellectual skepticism, is a willingness to doubt your own beliefs and like actually try and like understand an alternative viewpoint.
And then maybe do something about it.
And then maybe do something about it. And it's like, I mean, but I think part of the difficulty with politics and society is going on now, or even with the pandemic, is like people are not willing to doubt their own beliefs. So like the people who are like the mask people are not, from what I see from like their discussions on the internet, they're not willing to entertain the fact that in fact what they see as their personal autonomy is not the highest good in this moment. And I will be honest, I don't know. I've tried to like inhabit that point of view, and I mean, I can understand if you're from a rural community where like no one in your communities have been sick. Like I even though I disagree with their position, I can think through it, and I can at least like, okay, I can understand a version of this. I think that's not us as like the people who tried to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer this past week. Like that's a different category. I think.
Yeah, that's a whole different level.
Well, because it's radicalism, because it's taken and I think to me, I think there probably is a link between radicalism and an unwillingness to entertain a skeptical thought.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because you can only to me, it's like the shortest path to radicalism is believing that you are right no matter what, regardless of evidence. And I think it's difficult because even when we talk about evidence, like there's a lot of psychological research and humanist research that talks about, and even like neuroscience actually, it talks about the fact that the way you perceive the world is changed by your beliefs. Two people can look at the same exact event, the same exact evidence, and see completely different things. They're not acting irrationally. And the way that you counter that is by being willing to doubt your own perception and doubt your beliefs occasionally. And maybe you come back around and be like, no, this is what I believe based off of evidence, and here's my logical argument. But you have to go through the process. I feel like I've gotten off a very weird tangent on this episode.
No, but I think that's all. I think it's all relevant. But I think another problem is people not understanding how science works. I mean, I've seen posts and I've heard people talk those scientists don't know anything either. They keep changing their mind and telling us something different.
Yeah, that's how science works.
That's how science works. Yeah, and people don't seem to understand that. It just
right. Well, it's
last week they told us this, and this week they're telling us that. Well, because there's new information this week. That's the way that works.
Or like people who go well, evolution is just a theory.
Just a theory.
You really don't know what theory means in society.
Right. Gravity is just a theory, but I haven't flung myself off the planet yet.
Right, and I've heard people make that argument. I've seen people and heard people and met people who have made an argument about gravity.
Yeah.
That like the idea of like, oh, it's just a theory. Gravity could like change fundamentally tomorrow. And I'm like,
no.
Like, technically it's possible, but like the likelihood of that happening is like you are more likely to be hit by probably your own personal comment. Gravity.
Quantum theory.
God, now that's going to happen.
Quantum theory allows for the collapse of the probability wave in infinite ways. It's much more likely to keep collapsing the way it always has.
Right.
Right.
It becomes an odd thing because those sort of things happen in sciences and in humanities as well, right? Like I have run into so many people who non-academics, I mean, just like, day-to-day people who will say, well, the problem is with you academics is that you think that Marxism will work, the Marxism theory. And it's like, well, Marxism is a theory, but theory doesn't mean Marxism doesn't work or not work. It just is. You're talking about an ideology. Idea. Marxism describes how culture and capital interact with each other. It's like you're saying addition doesn't work, right?
Also, if you literally sat down with Capital or 18th Room Air or something, you would literally just see like Marx's journalist background and like all his figures and numbers and like descriptions of history. And like there's definitely underpinning theory there explaining how it's all working together. But like there's a lot of numbers in Capital. Like
it's also why like when people go to implement Marxism into a political form, what that ends up looking like, it's not the same in every situation.
Right. Because we're literally talking about an economic and a cultural theory that might have ideologies that grow out of it. And the problem is, without, say, going to college to study it or listening to every episode of this show, which you totally should be, you don't necessarily have or not just necessarily even just our show. Like, people don't necessarily have the background to understand something just because they read a couple of articles or a couple of tweets. And people don't understand how much work goes into research.
Absolutely. Well, also just just to pick on the Marx example, a lot of things have been done with Marxist theory since Marx.
Yeah.
Most of them. Yeah. Marxism has very little to do with Karl Marx at this point.
Right, exactly. So when people this is my big frustration when people say I don't agree with Marxism. I'm like, well, what part don't you agree with? Do you not agree with the original observations that Karl Marx makes? Do you not agree with his ideology? Do you not agree with the atheist down the streets ideology? What about and I would go so far to say Marxism now probably has virtually infinite permutations when it's especially when it's applied.
What they mean is that the libtards are bad.
Okay.
That's what they're saying.
No, exactly, which is an anti-intellectual argument and just bonkers.
Can we add a footnote right here, just real quick, a little PSA?
Sure. My foot down.
Okay, great. Okay, if you are listening to the show and you think Joe Biden is a socialist, as a socialist myself, as someone, yes, and also as someone who literally spent so many years reading Marx, reading Engels, reading Marxist theory from the 19th century to the future and other permutations of socialism, like Robert Owens, the father of the 8-hour workday. Let me tell you, what Joe Biden wants is not socialism.
Unfortunately.
Maybe
being on the left does not mean socialism. Being on the left does not mean Marxism.
He's barely on the left.
Right.
Okay. That's all I just need to say.
He's on the left in a world where apparently a wannabe fascist white supremacist is apparently what the right is.
Yes.
Right. I love that we got a YouTube comment recently, which I just adore.
No sarcasm there.
No, I do. I totally love this. On our YouTube channel, we got a comment. It says, "This is an odd little Marxist channel." And I couldn't help myself. So I answered it and I said, "That probably describes us perfectly. Thank you." to which they responded, "Using freedom of speech to end freedom of speech." And I'm like, that's not what Marxism means in any definition of Marxism. It's just that it means.
I am so baffled by that comment. It's also just I wish this person, I want a sound clip from them, maybe even on the show. They could come onto the show. I want them to explain to me what on earth Marxism means to them.
It means you're a pinko libtard bastard. That's what it means.
But I want them to explain it, and I want them to try and defend the position. That's what I want.
I don't think there's more defense. I mean, if you look at some of the arguments that I get into on,
I know.
For listeners who don't know me personally. I have to this day, and I do not block people on Facebook or Twitter, or I don't necessarily follow you back, but I don't block people. I rarely delete comments, and I rarely post anything privately or friends only. Things that I say online are public because that's what I use online for. I do not recommend this course to any other people. You've listened to the show. I wasn't exactly sane to start with, and the internet has not done me any favor. My grasp on sanity is tenuous at best. But I feel as though I provide a service through doing this. And so I end up arguing with people, some of whom are crazy people. And what I've learned is anybody who's just complaining that I am a Marxist. For one thing, I will always answer, why, yes. I mean, I've literally taken a dozen courses to become a Marxist. That's literally what I do. So yes, but they don't have.
Also, if you're in the humanities, you can't get the phrase "I'm a Marxist" in any form of humanist scholarship.
Yeah,
you can't practice the humanities without either directly by having to study Marx on some level or reading theories that are influenced by Marx's work.
Right.
either in agreement or in disagreement. Like
Right.
to study culture is a part of that is studying Marx's
Marxism.
work and its impact.
And also economics and also philosophy. And so essentially at this point, it's like saying, thank you for acknowledging my PhD. I appreciate that. There's not really a counter argument to it. But it's and I'm just having fun with people when I argue with them at all. But it's become very clear to me over the years that there is no real argument for it. What they mean is they mean you're a communist, but they don't actually know what communism is either. So they mean Marxism, socialism, communism, pinko bastard are all the same thing. And what people who use that argument usually mean is, well, you're wrong because, I don't know, Nazi. And like there's not.
Well, you're wrong because I don't agree with you.
Right. And there's no understanding.
And also, like, I don't agree with you and I don't care to understand or consider why you believe what you believe.
And typically, to my experience, the people who use that argument don't necessarily, they identify themselves as being on the right or being conservative, but they typically don't actually understand conservative politics or ideology either. They've just chosen a side and often just want to be dicks. Like I've seen people argue Black Lives Matter, they're terrorists. It says right there on their website that they're Marxist. And I'm like, Marxism doesn't mean terrorism. What the fuck are you talking about? But there's no explanation.
That's what the NRA told me.
Right. And but there's no explanation because they don't even, the NRA doesn't say that. They don't know. It's just they've chosen a side to argue and they don't necessarily have, like you said, you want to see them defend it. I don't think there is a defense, which is why this guy, when he's like, well, you're using freedom of speech to end freedom of speech. Like, regardless of whether you agree with me or any of the three of you politically at all, there is no way you can listen to 5 fucking minutes of this show and think we want to end freedom of speech. The tagline is pop culture analysis, pseudo-academic roundtable pop culture analysis with drinking and swearing. This is literally all the stuff.
If we were trying to end freedom of speech, we wouldn't ask for listener comments.
Right. And we wouldn't have guests.
Also, we probably wouldn't have our comments open on our YouTube channel.
Right. I could close them off.
Invite guests in to tell us what they think.
Yeah.
Right. Because ending freedom of speech is so far from my mind that I can't even think of the ways in which it did not occur to me the ways in which we could use a podcast to maybe do that.
we let Hannah be on this show and she hates Riverdale. Come on. Yeah.
I was waiting for that. You wait.
Oh boy. You mean we've reached that point of the episode.
You mean I can disagree with you and I can still be on this show?
Apparently, yeah. I'm sure Mav is uncomfortable with it, but
well,
yeah, but he's a libtard, so
Right.
I am. Yes, I am.
To get back, I guess to get, I feel like we've got off on a productive, and I think related tangent. Well, I think that's the thing, though, is I don't know, a lot of not every dystopian movie or every oh god, we're all gonna die kind of movie, but a lot of them have to do with cultural divisions and a lack of understanding or an unwillingness, I should say, to understand.
Actually,
Blade Runner. Blade Runner is Blade Runner is I don't, is people the humans are I don't acknowledge or want to understand a version of life that, we as a species have created that is different. I don't want to understand it. I don't want to consider it. I don't want to think about it. I just want to go on in my bubble life and continue doing it. And then eugenics. I always bring it back to eugenics bad. This is what I do now.
That's sci-fi. But to flip that, because I did research for this podcast and watched Terminator 2 for the first time last night. Yeah, that's weird. Miles Davis is the scientist who's the creator of Skynet, and the reason why Skynet gets stopped or at least delayed, depending on what canon you want to follow in the Terminator universe, because there's way too many, is because he is willing to listen and understand. And you might not like how the narrative plays out in that film. And also, why didn't no one tell me that Terminator 2 is basically E.T., but with a Terminator?
Oh, it totally is. Miles Dyson, by the way, just because.
That's my favorite description of that movie ever.
I said Dyson. Shoot. Yes,
Miles
Dyson,
Davis. I'm
not
wait,
Davis.
is his name Yeah, but it totally is ET.
Miles Davis.
It totally is ET.
No, you know what? I've said Miles Davis. I said Miles Dyson. You can just edit that, and we don't have to know that I did that.
I do. I do that all the time on the show, and I'm just like, it's funnier when you guys make fun of me for it. So, but yeah, no, it's totally ET, and like that's that's kind of the weird thing, right? Because ET is like Steven Spielberg's hopeful vision of, this is what alien contact will look like. Except that like his hopeful vision of alien contact, everybody is awful except for like 4 kids. Like the entire human race is horrible in ET. And like Terminator, it is a very similar story, I guess. Terminator 2, as you're saying. So is that like, when we're saying that 2020 is our worst timeline, is it only our worst timeline because we don't have some plucky hero trying to save us all? Because Joe Biden ain't that plucky hero.
No, I don't know who that plucky hero is.
But like,
well, did we argue last time, and by last time I maybe mean every time, that individual heroism doesn't work?
It doesn't.
Like,
That's part of our American myth.
So what we're saying is collective action is necessary, which is why you should go. Why you should go vote, and also support Black Lives Matter, and also probably join a union.
Yeah.
Self-organization from bottom to top. Marxist interpretation of the new Star Wars sequels. That's definitely off topic. Anyway.
But wait, when you were just saying, like the American monomyth, we have these ideas of, even we make heroes out of people in real life people, real life people, Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Hamilton now, all of a sudden for some reason, which is odd. I know, it's great, but which is
basically a fictionalized version of Hamilton.
Oh yeah,
yes, yeah, which is exactly what I'm getting at. We create heroes to be embodiments of essentially unions, of collective action, because we need a hero to worship.
We need the symbol.
Yeah, and that becomes, that's what this is about. So like when you look at something like Terminator 2, yes, I get that Sarah Connor is like this amazing, plucky hero going to save the world by herself, or with the aid of her son and like, one bad guy turned good, who they still end up killing, I get that. But like in real life, they're representing the need for everybody to come together and not just have the message of Terminator 2 is don't have total confidence in unchecked progress, technological progress with no humanities, with no humanity to it. That's what it's really about, right? Yeah. It's Terminator 2 is literally like listen to the message and try to do good rather than just like
it's literally about the value of human life. There's this really obnoxious voiceover at the end. It's like, if a Terminator can see the value in human life, then there is hope for all of us. That's almost word for word. Like, okay, James Cameron.
And I mean, this comes back to that American monomyth that Mav and I talk about so frequently. It's that dichotomy we have in this country of both those ideals of e pluribus unum, united, the United States. This whole we are better when we stand together, but all of our heroes are the lone gunslinger pulling yourself up by the bootstrap, your own bootstraps kind of thing. The gunslinger comes to town and fights off the bad guys in a way that the whole rest of the town together couldn't.
Right. Because you need that one guy who who walks against the wind and all that.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, that is just so typical of so much of our fiction, of both of those ideals at odds and at the same time kind of walking hand in hand in some weird way. Including
all the these stories that we're talking about, like just the list of them. Hunger Games we mentioned, it has that story, right?
Is it not the failure of that story, as we talked about last time? Like
sure.
Katniss doesn't really do that much.
She does almost nothing. Like the plot happens around her for 3 books, but she's still, but at least it's self-aware. I mean, she is the symbol of that movement.
Oh, no, like it's definitely on purpose. Like, I'm not saying it's bad, like a failure in the sense that like these books are failures. I'm saying like it's pointing out the problems of like the Harry Potter kind of thing.
The one chosen, the chosen one.
Yeah, Luke Skywalker.
Even in Harry Potter, if it wasn't for all those other people,
Yeah,
So
but
does-
that's not an accident. That's on accident, not on
Yeah.
purpose. I don't think J.K. Rowling was self-aware enough to she should have just made Hermione the hero because. but we won't get into that. We won't get into J.K. Rowling tonight.
Same
That's
thing,
enough.
Blade Runner is one guy. Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 are both the story of one guy who decides to rebel against this system, right? Planet of the Apes is that. Idiocracy, one of my favorite movies. Watch Idiocracy if you haven't seen it. That's what all of these are. So does the question become what 2020 needs is at least the idea of a Katniss Everdeen plucky hero for us to all rally behind? I mean, is that maybe who?
Well,
is that maybe who?
Unfortunately, I think the right has that. They have rallied behind Trump, plucky or not. He is that symbol for them.
Right. So, well, and I mean, is this? I mean, the problem is Joe Biden is just not inspiring enough to be that symbol on the left, right? But maybe that's what Bernie Sanders was, because it's not like it's hit for. And this is like I'm sure this is going to piss off a lot of our listeners who tend to be more liberal, but. Just so you know, Bernie Sanders did not invent democratic socialism. I know. I'm sorry. I just burst the bubble. But like, isn't that what he was trying to be? Isn't that what AOC is trying to be now? And so
I think she's a good candidate for that.
Yeah. And so does that is that what we need? Do we need somebody to just rally behind to where she becomes the Katniss Everdeen symbol of the movement?
But I think the issue with that becomes the problem, like not the problem with Bernie specifically as a candidate, but the issue that happened in the 2016 election is because people were so committed to Bernie Sanders,
they couldn't see anything else. Yeah.
Right. Because I knew a lot of people personally, and this became, has actually become a major contention that we had for a very long time, that refused to vote for Hillary because Hillary wasn't Bernie. And like,
by the way, there's a lot of reasons to not vote. Like, if you don't agree with what somebody stands for, even Joe Biden, who I want to win, if you don't agree, if you fundamentally think somebody's bad, that's different. But I don't think most of it's thought out. I think most of it's not. Most of it is it's not our guy.
Okay. Yeah, and that was the thing. Is it's like, I mean, I think to me that's the distinction between like someone who supports Bernie Sanders, which like I would count myself in that group, and what a lot of people would pejoratively refer to as a Bernie bro. Like, to me, a Bernie bro is not actually someone who has thought through what democratic socialism actually means, or potentially even understands that Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist. They just are in it for the club.
Which, like,
frankly, he's not even that good of one.
And that idea of symbols, I think, historically speaking, I think Kennedy was that for the Democratic Party at the time. I think he embodied that symbol. I think Reagan did for the Republicans in 1980.
Yeah, I mean, he still does. I think that actually Biden being the most uninspiring candidate we could have come up with besides Pete Buttigieg might actually. I don't know. Like I'm sorry, what do you want from me?
We talked about that on a previous episode.
2020 is what it is. Like, let's not hold anything back because nuclear apocalypse could happen. Who knows? Anyway, point being, like, he's not inspiring, but we like want him to win because, like, I mean, the truth is like I never get to vote for anyone I actually agree with totally in my politics because one, like, it's hard
because
to have
America.
everyone because America, but also because like. I'm just like so far to the left.
For one thing.
No, I'm not. I'm voting in North Carolina now because I'm in North Carolina. So, I graduated, so I had to be. I got a job in North Carolina. In case you were wondering about me starving on the street, I'm not doing that. I guess you figured that out since I have a computer. Anyway, but North Carolina is also a contested state. Also, Mississippi is totally winnable this year. It truly is. For Mike Espy, donate to his campaign if you have the time. He's in a close race with Cindy Hyde-Smith. And in case you're wondering who Cindy Hyde-Smith is, she is the worst senator in America who made jokes about voter suppression. I don't want to insult the devil.
Whoa!
I have enough people out
She's
there.
real bad. She's real bad.
She's real bad. Anyway, but the point is that, like, I don't agree with Joe Biden, but I want Joe Biden to win because the fact is, if Trump wins, it's going to be a lot worse for a lot of people who don't have the same privileges we do. Like, it's just going to be bad.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and it's
like
politics is not a like my like I'm increasingly frustrated by this whole like my side, your side thing in politics, which is like kind of what happens when you have a two-party system, is because it's like, it's more complicated than that. Like, I mean, as we've been saying, it's like Biden is not my favorite candidate. I disagree with a substantial amount of his policies. However, his policies are at least closer on the overall scope of like what is possible in terms of policies.
Given the choice
Trump
we are being
is.
presented.
Yeah, but
Right, exactly. And like politics is a pragmatic decision. It's not like, and this is like, the problem is this is not a, like, I guess I would disagree somewhat, I think, a little bit with Mav in terms of like, if you don't agree with the politics, it's if you don't agree with any of their politics, yes, but you can't hold out for a candidate that agrees with everything that you say, because that's never going to happen.
Yeah, my argument was pretty much what yours is. Yes.
Sure. Here's my point, though. Since Biden is uninspiring to, it seems, almost everyone, if he wins, it might, like, I think it could be possible for us to say, all right, like, Biden is better than Trump because, that's a low bar, but our problems aren't solved. We didn't elect someone who we totally agree with. Like, organization, like on the local levels, like the calling and the protests and the fundraising, like none of that needs to stop. We need to keep going. Like, electing Joe Biden won't save us. And I think that sometimes, if people thought that Bernie,
we're not going back to brunch.
I can give you the best reason to vote for Joe Biden. If you're a weird conservative who happens to somehow listen to our show, here's the reason to vote for Joe Biden. That's very, very obvious. If you're the kind of person who writes something like that comment of, odd little Marxist channel, and what they meant was that all four of us are pretty clearly liberal, and just like I've been doing things like I've been teaching in my freshman class. We've been talking about media bias the last couple of weeks, and I had one student who's like, well, it seems like all the fact check sites are biased against conservatives. They're not. It's just that Trump lies a lot. So if you really listen to this show and you think of yourself as somewhat right wing, and you think that, liberals are just always, we're just always horrible people, vote for Biden, get Biden elected president, and then you get to see us complain about Biden for 4 years, because I assure you we're going to. I'm not going to be happy. This is not going to, if you think that it's an either or two-sided face thing, and because I've gotten into so many arguments, people like, well, you never complained about Barack Obama. Fucking read I've been on the internet pretty loudly, and like everything's public that I've written in the last like 30 years. I've been like writing stuff publicly. You can go and you can check my website. I complained about Obama all the time. I complain about Trump more because Trump is a crazy person who is very, very worse. Who's empirically worse.
He's the literal worst.
Yeah. But I will,
and
I will complain.
On the fact checking thing. It's like, I mean, this goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier about like people not being willing to like step outside of their beliefs. It's like if like, to me, it's like the fact checking thing. It's like, okay, you see a like, say we look at 10 fact checking sites. 9 out of those 10 are telling you that the thing that you thought was true is not in fact true, or the thing you believed is not true. I don't understand. I'm not sure I understand the perspective of like these of looking at these fact checking sites. It's like 90% of them are telling them that you are wrong, then just being like, oh, those 9 are incorrect. This one.
These are people who don't brush their teeth. 9 out of 10 dentists agree that brushing your teeth prevents cavities. And then apparently there's this one crazy dentist who's like, fuck brushing your teeth. Cavities are a myth, a hoax. like that's like, logic.
I don't like, I'm willing to entertain the position of people that believe that they're embattled and believe that there is a giant hoax thing. But it's like, without evidence that that is in fact happening, it doesn't make any sense to me. And like, there are times in history, I mean, for example, like, other worst case scenarios, there's like things like, Nazi propaganda. There are times, or I mean, if we want to talk about socialism, like Russian propaganda, like that that there's been attempts to construct a reality through media and through things like facts. Trump's doing it right now to create an alternate reality, essentially, that people would believe in. Like that is a demonstratable, like historical and present reality. But the thing is, it's like we can identify those as that phenomena because there is actual evidence
that
phenomena is happening. I don't see that for basically the other position.
So we've resolved nothing.
We've resolved.
Yes.
We should vote, and
We
you
should
should
Vote for Joe Biden.
Actually-
Eugenics are bad.
Eugenics are
vote for
bad.
Eugenics are bad. Eugenics always bad.
Cindy Hyde Smith bad.
We'll just make a list of just like. Oh, but then how are we going to do with Riverdale in the list of things that are bad?
Riverdale's good.
You guys are gonna
Riverdale's the
have to
best
show
show on
that.
TV.
Riverdale's just off the list, you know, like it's like let's just leave it. Let's just like battle it out here. It'll give us content.
We can get like a little clip-on. We can get like a little clip-on tag for the T-shirt where there's like a little box that you can like put it in there if that's what you believe.
Oh, it's just, I don't know. It's not the worst timeline because a comet hasn't hit the Earth yet. I know there's one coming for us.
We're still allowed to do this podcast.
We're still at this podcast. I think it's also like if by some chance this is the worst possible timeline, we're at the beginning of that timeline. I think
We can turn the boat around.
Yeah.
We can turn the boat around, guys. We could, in fact, get a bigger boat.
No, there's an iceberg in front of us, but we're already committed. We're just going to have to hit it. We're going to have to hit it.
Don't tell people, Mav, don't tell people about the iceberg. They'll panic.
Yeah, right.
It's fine. It's melting anyway.
Oh Lord. Okay.
The iceberg is a deep state hoax. There's no
So-
This is a weird episode, guys.
So we apologize to our listeners who are expecting a conversation about science
More
fiction
movies.
timelines.
We
started
gave it to
there.
them. But also we did our own sci-fi timeline because we began with a conversation about our own lives. We went through the weeds, we went on a journey, and at the end we're like,
That's
we
true.
can still
That's true.
save the world. We can
We
still
have
make this
walked
happen.
into Mordor.
Yeah, we were like the time machine. Oh my god, we did the time machine. We went to the future, we saw the future, we came back and we're like, we can still stop the Morlocks.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's
So wait a second.
interesting.
If Trump loses, that means it was our podcast that clinched it. That's what you're telling me, Hannah.
And if Trump wins, then it's because we didn't get enough 5-star reviews. So please leave one on iTunes.
Best segue ever.
Wow. Okay. Just I think I did this episode entirely sober, so I don't know what that says.
Oh well, we should definitely. Hannah, where can people find you?
Mostly on this podcast and voxpodcast.com, where you can read our blogs and leave comments about future episodes. And I guess you can follow me on Twitter at Hanley Rogers. But let's be honest, I'm not tweeting.
Yeah, you haven't been. Sad. Twitter's been very lonely without you, Katya.
Same. Most of my media presence for the moment is on podcast, but you can find me on the Instagrams when I decide to start posting again like a real person. Because as we know, if there's no pics, it didn't happen. At just that nerd kid.
And Wayne.
Yeah, mostly here these days. So.
I barely leave my house. There's no way you guys are less interesting than me. I just don't understand this.
I also barely leave my house, my dude.
I also barely leave my house.
Miss that part of the pandemic conversation we were having?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
You just didn't leave your house very often before the pandemic. That's
I know.
I had a conversation with a grad student, and he was like, after the pandemic, my life really didn't change that much. And that made me think about how sad it was or something, like how much time we spend in the house, like doing research as like grad students.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was the thing. But like I had this 1 year long research fellowship where I was literally doing research from home and not seeing people that ended. Like it overlapped with the pandemic by like 2 months. So literally the thing that everybody's doing, I had already been doing for 10 months. And so now it's just this extension of like what my life had been for the year before. And it's just like, I don't know for a fact that people exist who aren't in Zoom meetings. I've not seen one. I don't know. Isn't that just how people work? They're in little boxes on your screen. It's been like 2 years, folks. I don't know. But for me. So anyway, you can follow me on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, all of the places, always at Chris Maverick. You can follow the show, same thing, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Vox Popcast. You can follow the show's blog at www.voxpopcast.com, where, like Hannah said, we talk about whatever we're going to be talking about next week. And you can leave comments on this show or any other show. Let us know. Let us know what you think about this darkest timeline, and if you're mad about us because we didn't really talk about details of Blade Runner the way we sort of thought we might. But, whatever.
We should do a Blade Runner episode. I love Blade Runner so much.
Hot take. I actually think I like Blade Runner 2049 more than I like Blade Runner. I've seen both. I actually would
agree with that.
Yeah, and I have reasons that we could probably talk about, but not today.
Hotter take. I like the narrations from the original cut of the Blade Runner.
Okay, so Hannah's off the show now. It's not the Riverdale thing.
Yeah, actually, Hannah, I'm sorry.
It's been
Blade
great.
Runner narration's bad. I'm gonna come down hard on that.
Well, but we should do that show. And if you'd like to see that, leave us a comment. Let us know if you want to see us do a Blade Runner show, so that because this could be a fight. That could be the end of it. And if you enjoy the show, we certainly hope you do. Please subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify or wherever the hell else you get podcasts from. And do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review, especially on iTunes. If you leave us a review and not just a rating, it makes us go up in the algorithm. It makes us famous, which amplifies our voices, which means people will vote out Donald Trump and we will save the universe and we won't have Hunger Games. And do you really want to watch children kill each other on TV? And I know the gut inclination is to say yes, that sounds exciting, but just really think about it. Think about it. Do you really want to see that? You probably don't. We've got reality TV already. We don't need it to be worse. So
reality TV is what gave us Trump.
Yeah. There you go.
Think deeply about this.
And really, as much as you might think that you want the purge, and the purge is coming, you don't want the purge. So really, really think about this. And this all starts by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes that talks about how great the show is. We will save the world. That's what I'm looking for. This is the most upbeat I've ever done this pitch. Usually it's really dreary and it's all about, leave us a 5-star review so I don't kill myself. This is I'm trying to save the world here, folks. So
he's in fact putting on his cape right now.
That's right. Anyway, how many capes? No capes. No, I don't have any capes. Edna, what's her
how
name?
many of those capes do you own?
Eugenics bad. Capes bad.
Capes bad.
Voiceover from Blade Runner bad.
Yeah, Cape is nature. Even in all the superheroes that I ever made, like they're based loosely on myself from drawing comics as a kid. I'm not a cape guy. No.
All right. On that note.
Anyway, I would like to thank Maximilian of Thoughtform Music for our epic theme song, building ever so more epically and playing us out. I'd like to thank you at home for listening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Gaff had been there and let her live. 4 years, he figured. He was wrong. Tyrell had told me Rachel was special. No termination date. I didn't know how long we'd have together. Who does?